stranger had taken his seat. Not a man, not a child, not even another old soul seeking quiet by the water. It was a bear. Huge, unbothered, and unwilling to move. But instead of fear, what followed was something far greater. An encounter that would change his life forever. Every dawn, Samuel Whitaker brewed a pot of coffee, poured it into his chipped thermos, and stepped out of his weathered, clapboard house on the edge of town. The world was still and gray at that hour, when most of the neighborhood was asleep, but Samuel's footsteps crunched faithfully down the gravel road that led him toward Willow Creek Park. The park was small, barely more than a clearing with a narrow lake at its center, but to Samuel it was sacred. For 3 years since his wife Clara had passed, the walk to the water's edge had been his only ritual, his anchor against grief that sometimes felt endless. He always sat on the same bench. It was nothing remarkable. A sagging plank of wood under a maple tree whose branches bent like tired arms. But on the left side of that bench, carved with a shaky hand on their 40th wedding anniversary, were the words Sam plus Clara. Always, the carving had faded, but it was still visible, a quiet reminder of a love that death had dimmed but not erased. Samuel always sat on the right side. That had been Clara's rule. She liked being closer to the water, where she could watch dragonflies skim the surface. Even now, years later, Samuel never took her side. He left it open, as if saving space for her ghost. Each morning, he spent an hour talking to her. Sometimes out loud, sometimes only in his head. He told her about the weather, the dreams he could still remember, the aches in his joints. Sometimes he brought the newspaper and read to her, his voice cracking on obituaries that reminded him of how relentless time could be. He wasn't sure if Clara could hear him, but it made the silence bearable. Until one morning in late spring. That day, as Samuel rounded the bend in the path, thermos warm in his hand, his steps froze. Their bench, was already occupied. And not by another grieving widow or a curious teenager, but by a massive, shaggy creature, fur glistening dark brown in the pale light, body stretched across the wood like it had been waiting just for him. A bear. Samuel's heart slammed against his ribs. Every instinct told him to turn and run, but his old legs couldn't carry him fast enough if the animal gave chase. So he just stood, frozen. The bear was huge, easily 400 pounds, its head resting on one paw, the other draped lazily off the bench. It looked comfortable, not menacing, almost as if it had been there all night. The strangest part was what Samuel didn't feel. He expected terror, but what came instead was hesitation. Curiosity, even something close to recognition. His voice, trembling but soft, slipped out before he could stop it. Excuse me, that's my seat." The bear's ear twitched at the sound of his voice. Its amber eyes opened for a brief moment, fixing on Samuel. Then, with what could only be described as a sigh, it closed them again, utterly uninterested in moving. Samuel stood for minutes that felt like hours. Finally, he laughed under his breath. "Figures. Even in death, Clara still finds ways to send me surprises." For that morning, Samuel didn't sit. He lingered a safe distance away, sipping his coffee and watching the bear's steady breathing. When he returned home, the silence in his house felt louder than usual. Clara would have been delighted. She loved animals, especially strays. She once nursed a half-wild raccoon with a broken paw back to health. If she had been there, she probably would have tried feeding the bear sandwiches before Samuel even had time to panic. The next morning, Samuel's heart carried both dread and hope as he made his way back to the park. Part of him wished the animal was gone, that life could return to its predictable rhythm of loss. But another part, deeper and more honest, wished it would still be there. And it was, in the exact same spot, sprawled across the bench as though it had never moved. This time, Samuel came prepared. He carried a folding chair and set it down a cautious 10 feet from the bench. "If you're staying," he muttered. "I guess I'm staying too." He tried clapping, yelling, even playing a recording of a growling bear he'd found on his phone. Nothing. The creature barely flicked an ear. Samuel shook his head. "You're either deaf or just stubborn." For the first few days, they sat in silence. Samuel on his chair, the bear on the bench. Then slowly, the silence shifted. Samuel found himself talking, tentative at first, then fuller, like water breaking through a dam. I used to sit there with my wife, Clara. She passed 3 years ago. We carved our names on that bench. His voice softened as he pointed toward the faded letters. She said we were too old for silly things like carving trees. But she laughed anyway. She always laughed. The bear didn't react. But somehow Samuel felt listened to. For the first time since Clara's death, he felt less invisible. Over the weeks that followed, Samuel began to call the bear Bruno. It was a name Clara had once given to every teddy bear she ever owned. And as strange as it was, Bruno stayed. Every morning, same bench, same calm presence. The companionship became routine. Samuel spoke of memories he hadn't dared touch before. Their honeymoon by the ocean. The way Clara burned their first Thanksgiving turkey so badly they ended up eating pie for dinner. The night she danced barefoot in the rain while neighbors gawked, because she believed storms were meant to be celebrated, not feared. Bruno's presence turned grief into something softer. Memories that once cut like glass began to feel like gifts again. Seasons changed, and so did their rituals. In autumn, Samuel laughed until his chest hurt as Bruno rolled in piles of fallen leaves like a clumsy child. In winter, when the air bit through Samuel's coat and his arthritis flared, Bruno's massive body became a shield. Once, Samuel even leaned against his warm fur, his pain easing into drowsy contentment. In spring, Samuel brought an umbrella and sat with Bruno beneath it as rain pattered above. They watched the ripples spread across the lake, each circle colliding and merging until they became one. That's life, isn't it? Samuel whispered. We all ripple into each other eventually. Bruno never spoke, of course, but his silence was more comforting than any words. Then came the day that proved their bond was more than coincidence. It was late winter, icy paths slick with frost. Samuel shuffled carefully toward the lake when a stray German shepherd appeared from nowhere, growling, teeth bared. Samuel froze. His old legs wouldn't let him run. His cane slipped in his hand. Fear surged, real, primal fear. Before he could cry out, Bruno was there, rising from the bench like a storm made flesh, 8 feet of fur and muscle. His roar thundered across the lake, shaking Samuel to his core. The dog stopped instantly, ears flat, tail tucked, before bolting into the trees. Bruno lowered himself back onto the bench, as if nothing had happened. Samuel's eyes stung. You're not just a friend, he whispered. You're my guardian. After that day, Samuel noticed something new. Bruno began leaving little offerings on the bench. Pine cones arranged neatly, branches stripped smooth, wildflowers clumsily plucked. Samuel gathered them in an old wooden box Clara had once used for her jewelry. He called it Bruno's collection. Each item, however ordinary, felt sacred. But nothing lasts forever. One morning, Samuel arrived to find the bench empty. Not just early morning empty, but truly painfully empty. No shaggy fur, no amber eyes, no warm presence. He waited for hours, returned the next day, and the next. Days became weeks. Still nothing. The grief was sharp, like Clara's death all over again. But this time, Samuel noticed something he hadn't before. The way the wind moved through branches, each tree making a different song. The smell of damp earth after rain, promising growth. The lake's surface, calm above, yet alive with hidden currents beneath. Bruno had given him back his senses, his attention, his gratitude. When neighbors began whispering about the old man and the bear by the lake, Samuel didn't deny it. He shared the story with children at the local school when their teacher invited him to speak. Their wide eyes and endless questions filled him with warmth. He told them about grief, about love that lingers, about friendship arriving in forms we don't expect. Sometimes, he told them, healing doesn't look like medicine or therapy. Sometimes it looks like a bear taking your seat. The children laughed, but they also listened. And some swore on the field trip to Willow Creek that they heard something in the bushes near the bench, the faint rustle of fur, the low sound of breathing, the whisper of presence. Samuel didn't correct them. Some mysteries are better left intact. Now, each morning, Samuel still walks to the park. He still sits on the right side of the bench, Clara's side left open. Bruno's absence felt but not mourned. Because he knows absence doesn't mean loss. Not really. As the sun climbs and light dances across the lake, Samuel whispers his thanks. To Clara, to Bruno, to the quiet gift of being reminded that love, once given, never truly leaves. It only changes form, rippling outward, touching lives beyond what we can see. And though the bench is empty, Samuel is no longer alone. In the stillness of Willow Creek, an old man found healing in the most unexpected companion. A stolen seat became the start of a friendship that carried him from grief into gratitude. And in that friendship, he discovered that even endings can be beginnings, if we're willing to listen.